my name is Viviana Villa, and I'm going to be talking to you about the documentary Inequality for All. In this documentary, it revolves around a UC Berkeley professor, Robert Reich, who teaches a class on wealth and poverty. And in this class, they discuss the distribution between income and wealth and how it affects the U.S. economy. A topic discussed throughout the documentary, if not the main topic, is the middle class. And Robert explains how when the U.S. has a strong middle class, the economy actually benefits as a whole. Consumer spending increases, employment rate increase, and middle class workers actually seek for higher education, as well as unions are strong and people are not afraid to speak up about their working wages and their conditions. But Robert talks about how, on the contrary, in recent years, the U.S. middle class has actually suffered significantly and are actually struggling to survive and are living to a paycheck-to-paycheck lifestyle. Some factors that Robert explains had led to this significant shift in the middle class is globalization, and how globalization actually has caused U.S. American workforce to travel abroad and has actually lost jobs for the American workforce. Not only that, but middle class workers who are working in America are being replaced by high technology manufacturing utilities, and has caused them to suffer significantly. Another factor that Robert talks about is the shift in the financial market, and how in the financial market during the 2000s there was a shift in executive pay, and how executive pay actually started to increase and work wages actually started to decrease significantly. And as a result, unions actually became under attack during this time, and a lot of people weren't getting paid as well as they used to. Another factor that Robert talks about is taxation, and how the wealthy actually received many tax deductibles, and how the middle class actually gets taxed majority rather than the wealthy. And this has caused many middle class workers to become very frustrated with the government, because they are not understanding how wealthy people who are making double the amount of money aren't paying as much in taxation, while they're trying to barely survive, and what little they have they're being taxed on. And lastly, a topic that Robert talks about throughout the documentary is the shift in the political change, and how billionaires actually had started to fund politicians' campaigns. And I think he even talks about how in recent years many people believed that billionaires would be able to buy politicians within the election. Some economic trends presented throughout the documentary that are discussed in our class is the idea of trade-off, when someone gives up something in exchange for another thing. In the documentary, they interview a Costco worker named Erica, and they ask her how much money she has in her bank account. She says $25. With this money, she has to either buy groceries, or she wanted to be able to purchase an iPhone in order to communicate with her daughter at school. Because of scarcity, she has to make a choice of whether she purchases the groceries for her family or the iPhone. As a result, she purchases the groceries for her family and has to trade off the idea of purchasing an iPhone for her daughter. Another example of an economic trend presented throughout the documentary that is discussed in our class is the circular flow model. And when the circular flow model occurs, it is a product or a consumer being able to buy a product, then that money is able to flow back into the company that product was manufactured in, and with that money, the company is able to use that money in order to pay for the production costs to make that product. Then that money that they use for the production costs goes to paying those workers who work in that manufacturing company, then going back to the household consumers in order to pay for a manufacturing good or service. So in the documentary, they talk about the middle class, and how the middle class, when they are receiving high wages, they're able to actually produce more consumer spending in order to increase the circular flow model. But when the middle class isn't strong, the consumer spending actually decreases, and this decreases the circular flow model. My concluding thoughts on the documentary Inequality for All are that the middle class is very important to the U.S. economy, and with a strong middle class, we are able to produce more consumer spending and have good employment rates. Another thing that really popped out to me within the documentary was how, in the end, Robert encourages his students to be the change within the economy, and I really found that inspiring, and I really liked how he concluded with just the personally having the personal stories of those middle class workers within the documentary, and how income truly affects the middle class and how much they're struggling.